Crime is up, indeed, in most major cities, including New York City, but that's just a matter of analyzing some data. It actually doesn't paint a full picture of what is really going on here. And the real question that people should be asking is why crime is rising. And that question is it requires more of a nuanced answer. Republicans and some Democrats are quick to blame the rise in crime on Democratic reform policies they've labeled soft or anti-police, like bail reform. And even though there's no proof at all to suggest that is the case in places like New York, that messaging has been enough for Democrats to scale back some of those reforms. But the reality is the increase in gun violence that we're seeing was predicted a whole year ago, and at the time attributed to two specific things: the pandemic worsening socioeconomic conditions for some folks, and a huge surge in gun sales, something that Jumaane Williams just mentioned. And joining me now to discuss, Fred Guttenberg. He's a gun safety advocate and the father of Jamie Guttenberg, who was tragically killed in the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting back in 2018. And Fred, you've previously on this very show brought up this exact point about the fact that what we saw yesterday and the rise in crime across the nation was completely predictable because of the rise in gun sales. Help us understand that.
No, listen, foreseeable, predictable. It doesn't take rocket science. When Jamie was killed in 2018, we had about 300 million weapons on the streets of America. Now we have about 400 million, plus the explosion in ghost guns. We don't know how many are there. During the Trump years, and specifically during the early days of COVID, they unleashed a gun surge on this country. There are consequences to that. You know, I listened to your earlier segment. This isn't an issue of underfunded police. There's plenty of funding, and the police are doing a great job. They are doing everything they can. But we have an issue in this country, and we did it. We caused it. We allowed our society to become so fully armed that we're now suffering the consequences of that. And the result, I'm done with the BS that forces us to not honestly deal with this reality of guns. We have prohibited buyers who can get guns any which way or a ghost gun and walk into the store to buy the bullets. And in too many states across this country now, where we have permitless open carry, they can just walk onto the trains or into buildings. You tell me how I'm supposed to know what their intentions are, what their motivations are, if they want to kill me or not, because you can't. This is so stupid, and we did it.
So one of the things you said there that I think a lot about is the fact that I don't want to live in the Wild West. Yes, I appreciate the fact that the founders have written a document called the Constitution, which includes the Second Amendment, but it also doesn't mean that, to your point, anybody can just get a weapon of mass destruction in some instances with no background check, with no regulation at all, and just walk around with it and basically terrorize people. Because in some ways, I think some of this is a performance. I mean, I don't know why you need the gun on your hip when you're going in to get your Starbucks, but a lot of people fight for laws just like that. Talk about the fact, or speak to the fact that we actually need a complete reimagining of this conversation. Yes, the Second Amendment exists, but that does not mean that my safety in public should be at risk like it was for those folks who were just on their way to where they needed to go yesterday during the morning rush hour, because somebody who is unstable has easy access to a gun. Why are these regulations so important? Should we make it harder for someone like that to get a gun?
You know what? I actually like the way you framed it. We need a reimagining of the conversation, and we do. We have a Second Amendment. It's not at risk, but we should all be asking ourselves these simple questions. Is everything we're doing now going to lead to a lower gun violence death rate? Is it going to lead to fewer instances of gun violence? Is it going to lead to less severe injuries when gun violence does happen? And if the answer isn't yes, then we need to be finding ways to ensure that it is. What President Biden did this week was so important and so courageous, because it really did get to this reimagining of the way we look at this. He took steps on ghost guns that will immediately save lives. Ghost guns really are the future of gun violence. And what he did this week is huge. And I hope as a country we were paying attention and we continue to do more things like that.
One of the things also I wanted to ask you about is there's been a lot of reporting, particularly in New York City, about the NRA and whether or not they still are this powerful lobbying organization that is preventing many of the regulations that you and others have lobbied for many, many years now. Is their power an illusion at this moment? To what extent are they still able to control the politicians that are standing in the way of some of these reforms?
The NRA is a weakened organization, but they exist. And as long as they exist, they have power. And I will give you an example. You currently have a Second Amendment case in front of the Supreme Court, filed by the NRA or people associated with them. In that Second Amendment case, Samuel Alito specifically argued, in essence, that we should be making it easier for people who want to carry guns onto the New York City subway to do so. Because of the NRA, there is a very good chance that this permitting law that has existed in New York for over 100 years may be declared unconstitutional. And what happened yesterday may not become so infrequent anymore because of the NRA. And we should care about that.
It's a really important point. Last question is about actually the ATF director, which I think probably wasn't a story that was top of mind for people, but you tweeted about the fact that President Biden nominated Steve Detterback. And he hasn't been, Detterback, excuse me, but he hasn't been confirmed yet. How important is it for this administration to put in place someone in charge of the ATF at a moment where, as we've been discussing, gun sales are at record highs and people are traumatized and anxious 3 years into this global pandemic?
I'll make it so simple. 90% of guns used in crimes come from about 5% of the existing network of gun dealers. So the majority of gun dealers are doing all the right things. It's a small minority. And unfortunately, the ATF has been leaderless and rudderless and has not followed up on inspections where they know there are bad actors. We have been without a permanent director of the ATF now for far too many years in this country. The current person there is a stool for the gun industry, and we need him out. We need a person who values our public safety and will do whatever he can to respect the laws of this country while keeping us safe. That person is Steve Detterback. I am so excited by his nomination. He has an over 2-decade career in doing this kind of work, and we need to get him confirmed.
Fred Guttenberg, thank you so much, as always, for being here, and please stay safe.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.